The Russia investigation and a low approval rating for President Trump.
Political analyst Wendy Patrick and Laura Fink joins us now with This Week in Politics. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Okay, we have to start with the hottest topic this week, right? Anthony Scaramucci, the mooch. Shocked? Are you guys shocked by this one? He's out.
Look, I'm not shocked by it. I mean, he came in a blaze of glory, and we all know that no matter how many values you sacrifice, you can be ignominiously fired and thrown under the bus in the Trump administration. Probably why they also have a number of leaks, because there's not a lot of loyalty. It's not a two-way street. We saw, even though he missed the birth of his child, saw his wife deliver him divorce papers, he couldn't hold on to that job. And that was because because Miss General Kelly came to town, and also because he eclipsed the attention of the president. Two things that Donald Trump doesn't like.
Wendy?
You know, General Kelly is taming the Wild West wing, and
he's trying.
He's trying. And one of his very first acts in office was to get rid of the mooch. And you know, it is obviously because the mooch went off message. Let's just be kind about what he actually said to that reporter. Wow. But also, you know, there were a lot of other things at stake as well. You know, and part of the problem was General Kelly is saying, hey, no more open door policy in the Oval Office. You just don't wander in and out when you have to talk to the president. And remember what Scaramucci said, that he had a direct line to the president. He wasn't going through anybody else. That right there wouldn't have worked with General Kelly. And General Kelly is a role model in that position. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't one of the reasons that the president appointed him. He's a calming influence. He just brings this quiet confidence. And I don't know if you watched the swearing in ceremony. He exudes competence and credibility. And I believe he will rub off on all of the other somewhat colorful players right now in the West Wing, if he allows them to remain to begin with.
So I suppose it doesn't matter now, but you know, he wanted to tell his own side of the story, right? He was going to do this online tell-all today, then it was canceled. I mean, is that necessary? I mean, is it a good thing?
Here's the thing. He had his moment in the sun, and like Icarus, he fell. He just flew too close to the sun. Now, I think that General Kelly, to get back to him, he cleaned house, but there's only so much he can do. We know that Trump is in a time of trouble right now. That's when he buckles down, gets a little bit more disciplined, of course, relatively speaking. But I don't think just because there's a new sheriff or a new general in town that much is going to change in the long term.
I think Icarus was kind of gliding a little bit longer than the mooch did over there. Okay, let's just say it. Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Now we have a grand jury in place. This was the big bombshell yesterday. Are you surprised that this is the direction this is going? How much of a big deal is it, Wendy, that we now have this grand jury?
The big deal is more that we know about it, because grand jury proceedings are supposed to be secret. It is not a big deal that there is a grand jury.
Nothing is secret here, apparently.
That's right, apparently. But it's not a big deal that there is a grand jury. I mean, that's part of Mueller's charge, is to do the investigation that he needs to do, he and his team, to decide whether or not there's going to be an indictment. And part of that necessarily involves subpoenaing witnesses and documents. And that's not something Mueller can do on his own. He has to do it through a grand jury. Now, what people are talking about is, oh, is it significant that it was impaneled in Washington, D.C.? I would say no there as well, because that's proximity to almost everybody they're going to need to talking about. We shouldn't read too much into it.
And potentially, we're looking at indictments on whom? Is it the president, staff members, family members? Who?
Well, that remains to be seen, but what we do know is that there are 16 lawyers whose expertises range from money laundering to international bribery to witness rolling. So I do think it's significant. I'm going to disagree with Wendy here. I think it's very significant that we have a grand jury in D.C. That means it's extended beyond the General Flynn investigation and is looking into other parties. And that subpoena power is broad, and that ability to not have witnesses plead the Fifth, have come in and tell their stories, is incredibly significant. It puts pressure on the witnesses to tell the truth. And more importantly, we will see now that Trump is dealing with a court of law when criminal charges are potential, that perjury and lying doesn't work anymore. You can get away with it in politics. You absolutely cannot get away with it in the justice system.
What's the time frame for this, Wendy?
Well, it's going to be extended, but let me say one thing about Laura's point. I think we already knew that it was much broader than General Flynn. And the reason we knew that, I hate to say, is because of even more leaks. But what distinguishes this now, and regarding the timeline, people are going to come in and testify, and they don't get to have their lawyers with them. A lot of people don't realize that grand jury proceedings, it's just a prosecutor. So there's no defense attorney making objections, counseling a client as to what to say and not to say. So it's true, perjury is very important. It's also true that it lengthens the timeline. Nobody should have expected this process to move quickly. We're not surprised there is a grand jury. Again, I don't think it's surprising it's in Washington because we already knew that some of the things that it's looking at, in fact, the leak yesterday said not General Flynn, but they're looking at Don Jr.'s meeting in June 2016 with the Russian lawyer. So we should expect that it's going to be a broad in scope. Now, one thing, if it gets too broad, there is a provision if they want to start investigating something else in the same fashion that Whitewater led to Monica Lewinsky, they do need to go back to the acting AG and ask for permission.
Okay, I have a question for both of you that I'm not taking this personally because we work in the media here, but here's the deal. The big rally that he had in West Virginia yesterday, the president, again, calling all this Russia stuff fake news, fake news. I can respect that he can call fake news whatever he wants, but when there's Mueller, when there's a special prosecutor, when there's a grand jury, how is that still fake news when these are not media people who are doing this?
Well, bashing the media is the red meat of Republican politics on the stump. And what we see here is that Donald Trump is appealing to his base, of course. But why? Well, the 33% approval rating, bottom basement, declining across the board since January. That's when you know he's in trouble. But I think, his bashing the media is the least of our problems. Advancing really toxic immigration policies like we saw him roll out this week to appeal to the racial anxieties of his base. I don't know if you remember this, but in the post-election analysis, we saw that racial anxiety was the greatest predictor of a Trump vote, not economic anxiety. So we acted like it was all economics, but really it was fear of the other coming in and taking jobs. And so by blaming immigrants, he's able to appeal to that base. It's a really dark time in our politics, and that's just more evidence of it.
Raul, one of the points I just want to make quickly about the fake news and what he said at the rally last night. One of the interesting polls that came out is what do Americans care most about? And Russia was not at the top of the list. It was things like health care, national security, jobs. Russia was down at the bottom. And then I think what the Trump administration is arguing that it's at the top of what the media is reporting on. So it's that disconnect that the administration is saying. They're calling it fake news. You can't really say that because it's true. There's an investigation going on. They're just saying we should, no, it's not, but they're just saying we should be focused on what the American people are focused on, which isn't Russia predominantly.
So what he's critiquing is the editorial process, not exactly whether or not it's real or not.
Well said, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Ladies, political analyst Wendy Patrick, Laura Fink, thank you once again.
Thanks, Christina.
Have
Thanks,
a good
Raul.
weekend.
Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend.
Let's go get some coffee.